Well, that was one of our crazier Monday night games. I would say since that Cincinnati Bengals game versus the Washington Commanders game several weeks back, I actually really enjoyed that game, to be completely honest with you guys. But I just want to ask you a question to you guys really quick. This is a serious question because sometimes I feel like I'm a grump. But was anybody else just so annoyed with the amount of penalties that were in that game? As you guys know, this is what I got right and wrong. But sometimes I do like to go through, what I do think about the Monday night game, especially if it's this interesting. And this one was a really entertaining game to watch. But to me, the penalties were everywhere. And listen, I get it. Like, there were definitely times where the penalties were warranted. But there was a lot of calls. Like, that one against Javonte Kinlaw when he was, like yapping at the ref. It's like, dude, really? Like, do we really freaking need that? It was starting to drive me up the wall. All those penalties and the amount of time that they were taking to make those calls, it was starting to drive me nuts. So, I don't know, maybe I'm just really grumpy. Let me know what y'all think, because that really got on my nerves. But of course, this is what I got right and what I got wrong in Week 6 Fantasy Football. I come here for Transparency Hour. This is what Transparency Hour is all about, otherwise known as my Night of Repentance, otherwise known as what I got right and wrong. Make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel to show your support. Let's start off with something that I got really right. Now, this was something that I was calling all week long in fantasy football, leading into the week. I capped it off with a video that I did on Thursday before the Thursday night game, where I went through my favorite starts of the week. And I tried to go position by position. And, one of the guys that I said was a major big-time start was someone that, on most teams is going to be a start either way. But the only reason I included him is because there were a lot of questions that I got leading into last week about, should I play Chris Godwin? And I was like, listen, you do not sit Chris Godwin, especially in this matchup right here. Chris Godwin's about to go off. And, like I said, I got a lot of questions about this one last week, and I understood why. Like, he had just come off of, like, 2 straight, like, 10-point fantasy performances, which were, pretty mid. That's, like, pretty mid stuff. And Mike Evans looked like the clear number 1. And he still is, to be clear. Like, Mike Evans is the number 1. Now, the major reason, one of them at least, in why Chris Godwin was a must-start for me last week was when we were going through, and every year I do this, and most years I get pushback on this. This year I didn't. I think people have kind of accepted this one a little bit for what it is with Mike Evans versus the New Orleans Saints. Mike Evans, when he plays the New Orleans Saints, it's just a different ballgame for him. There is no other corner in this league who has Mike Evans' number like Marshawn Lattimore does. So heading into that game, I was like, okay, well, Evans is not going to do much. Like, he has only had one 10-point fantasy performance against the New Orleans Saints since 2021 in a half PPR format. Like, that's horrible for Mike Evans standards. And conversely, Chris Godwin has had only one game under 10 fantasy points against the New Orleans Saints in that same time frame. And I was like, dude, you have to play him. Like, he cannot find his way to your matchup. I do not care how strong your wide receiver room is. I don't care if you have to bench Marvin Harris Jr. And that ended up being a great move. But, like, before the week, a lot of people were asking me about Chris Godwin. And I feel really good about this one. Chris Godwin has the number 1 week in fantasy football at the wide receiver position. And Chris Godwin, again, it just goes to be shown that you don't sit Chris Godwin. Like, this is not a guy that you're going to sit any week, but especially when he's taking on the Saints. Remember that for the next game they play the Saints this year. I don't remember exactly what week that is, but the next game that they play against the New Orleans Saints, remember about Chris Godwin. So the next thing is something that I really got wrong, and my last tier of defenses this past week were not great. The Saints defense ended up being okay, but the Cardinals defense was a really bad call of mine. That was a bad judgment error, to be honest with you guys. Because, my thing with the Cardinals defense heading into the week was, okay, the Cardinals, I think, are going to lose this game, and I think they're going to cede a lot of points to the Green Bay Packers. So I wasn't shocked by the final score of that game. Oh, I guess I wasn't shocked about how much the points the Packers put up. What I was shocked about was the Cardinals they didn't get the turnovers that I thought they were. They ended up getting 1 interception off Jordan Love, but they didn't get 2 interceptions, 3 interceptions. They didn't get really many fumble recoveries or anything like that, which they had been keen on doing this year. And that was the main reason that the Cardinals were at the end of my top 12 defense rankings this week. And obviously, like I said, the Cardinals ended up doing horrifically in fantasy football, so that's going to be one. With the Cardinals, I think what it really boils down to is that for me personally, I can't look at the Cardinals and think to myself, well, this is a team I can really trust and really rely on in fantasy football on either side of the ball. I can't rely on them on either side of the ball. So when it comes down to it, it's just like, okay, well, do I think they're going to be on this week or do I think they're going to be off? Because this is the most hot and cold team in the NFL. Like, honestly, I do not know another team that's more hot and cold than the Arizona Cardinals are. If you can think of one, let me know. Maybe the Cowboys you could consider putting into there, but I just think the Cowboys actually are bums. Like, I think the Cardinals actually have plenty of talent, both sides of the ball. But their team takes on the personality of Kyler. And Kyler's deal is like, sometimes he's feeling it and sometimes he's not. Like, that's Kyler's deal. And so I get it. This is a defense conversation, but it seeps into the defense when Kyler and the offense aren't getting anything going. And the reason I picked the Cardinals was also because I expected the Cardinals to at least match the Green Bay Packers in points for the majority of the game. I expected the Packers to win this game, but I thought that the Cardinals would at least keep this one close. And they didn't. And the Cardinals were bad defensive play. Now, the Saints defense, they weren't a terrible play. Ironically, and they ceded 50 points to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They ended up actually being a decent fantasy play because of the fact that they got, 3 interceptions off of Baker, and I think a forced fumble or a fumble recovery or 2. The Saints defense actually did pretty decent in fantasy football, but obviously the Bucs defense was the defense that you wanted here. And I had said it on that video in my defense rankings video this week. I said, I really do think that my reasoning for putting the Bucs behind the Saints this week, it has to be because of the fact that the Bucs defense stinks. And they weren't very good against the Saints, to be completely honest with you. They had a defensive touchdown in that game, and that was huge, obviously. So the Bucs defense, I don't think that you can rely on this in future weeks. This was a rare game where they got a defensive touchdown. You can't expect that every single week. Although it was Antoine Winfield, I do like Antoine Winfield. I've been kind of off the Bucs defense, in part because of Antoine Winfield's absence. He comes back, immediately gets a defensive touchdown. So that's great for the Bucs defense morale. But I don't think that you can rely on the Bucs defense moving forward, to be honest with you, in fantasy. Now, here's one that I got right on the defensive side of the ball. And I took a lot of questions for this. I wouldn't say I took a lot of heat for this one, but there was definitely a lot of questions about the Packers defense and why they were so high in my rankings this week. So the Packers defense ends up having a great game, obviously. As I was just talking about with the Cardinals just looked so sluggish offensively. And one of the reasons why the Packers was so high was because I was just like, listen, if this ends up being a ceiling game, which I think it very well could be, the Cardinals are going to look bad offensively, and there probably will be some turnovers in there as well. And the main reason the Packers are going to be highly ranked pretty much every week they play is because of the fact that they take the ball away from you. They take the ball away from you. That's the Packers' DNA, is that they're not going to hold every opponent to 14 or 17 points. That's not what they're doing. What they're doing is they're physical at the point of attack. They're getting turnovers, and they're getting after the quarterback. And they did all those things to Kyler Murray and the Cardinals in Week 6. So I was really happy to see the Packers come through. And for those of us who had the stones to play the Packers defense, I didn't think it took a lot of stones. It just made sense to me. So I played the Packers defense in a ton of leagues this week, and it paid off for me, and I hope it paid off for you because, like I said, I think this was a really good smash play from the beginning, and I felt really good about the Packers defense this week. Now, going back to the must-start and sit video, obviously I wasn't 100%. And and I think I've already seen a comment about it in the chat tonight. Jalen Tolbert, I called him a must start, and I will say this, I put a caveat on it of like, obviously if you're in like an 8 team or a 10 team league, and you've got like Chris Godwin, AJ Brown, and like, you know, Terry McLaurin, like you don't need to start him. But if you're in like a 12-team league or beyond, and you've got injuries, you've got bye weeks, like Jalen Tolbert's a great play. And again, not trying to excuse myself of this one, I got the call wrong. Jalen Tolbert and this whole Cowboys team looked like doo-doo. Doo-doo. Jalen Tolbert, he has an okay fantasy day, right? Like, he ended up getting a couple catches for like 40 yards or something like that. But Jalen Tolbert, you know, the problem that I see with Jalen Tolbert moving forward is that I think that this offense is so reliant on the pass. And it was something that I said leading into the week. Like, this Cowboys offense, they're not going to run the ball this week. You can guarantee it, honestly, because, like, number one, they may try to run it, but they're taking on one of the best run defenses in the NFL. Number two, when they start getting down, because they can't match the Lions at points, they're going to totally abandon the run. And they did exactly that. And that's when I thought Tolbert had the opportunity. Dak was just horrible. I mean, he was so bad. And realistically, like, he was really bad against the Steelers in week 5, but he got away with it because the Steelers didn't want to win the game. They just kept giving the opportunities back to the Cowboys. The Lions are just a much better team. You have to be way better to beat the Lions than you do to beat the Steelers. And they got absolutely embarrassed on their home field. Now, again, this is about Jalen Tolbert here. But with Jalen Tolbert, you know, I think that he will have better weeks. Like, Tolbert I actually do legitimately view as like a pretty solid number 2 NFL wide receiver who has like wide receiver 2 upside in fantasy, but for the most part is a pretty solid wide receiver 3 play. For the most part, that's what he is. So I think that Jalen Tolbert really is really going to be a matchup-based guy that I can see having a pretty safe floor week to week, but also just going to be there's going to be a big variance window with Jalen Tolbert because he actually does have like a 20-point ceiling. The problem is he has a floor of like 4 or 3 fantasy points. So, you know, Tolbert obviously was not the move this week, but I do actually have a pretty relatively positive outlook for Jalen Tolbert in future weeks. Here's something that I got really right. We're going to shift more towards the full season takes. Like, I want to go back to August and July and June and go through some guys that I had early convictions on and assess whether I was right or wrong about them. So these next 2 guys, that's what they're going to be. They're going to be full season guys. And it's so funny about this guy, man. Before the start of the season, back in like June, May, I was thinking to myself, like, I haven't liked him in other years. I've never really liked him in fantasy. I don't see a reason why I changed my tune on this now. He gets a rookie quarterback who's obviously playing tremendous football right now, and heading into the year, as the offseason started to go on, and I started to see more of Jaden Daniels, and I started to hear more about the Commanders players talking about how good Jaden Daniels was. Like, I remember there was one quote that really caught my eye was Zach Ertz, who's been in this league for a long time, tight end, and he said, you know, the reporters were asking him, like, you know, we've been seeing his potential, like, he's going to be really good, and he, like, said, stop saying he's going to be good. He is really good. And whenever players say that about their quarterback, that always catches my eye. Because players are a lot different than the media. Like, the media, they will hype up their local team that they're following around for whatever reason, right? Like, whether they're being paid by the organization to put out good promotion for them. I don't know. I'm not trying to get into that speculation. But, you know, with Terry McLaurin, he has been a massive benefit of Jaden Daniels, obviously. And Jaden Daniels, as the offseason go on, I just kept hearing better things. And it started to creep into my head around August. And I was like, hold on a minute. If Jaden Daniels is really good, let's say that he's really good this year. I actually really liked him as a thrower coming out of college. So I think he can produce throwing the ball. And it won't just be a rushing season. So who's he going to do it with? It's got to be Terry McLaurin. And Terry McLaurin's always been a really talented player. Like, Terry McLaurin does not lack the talent. There's no question about that. What Terry McLaurin has always lacked is a quarterback. So it got me really thinking about it, and I was like, I have a feeling we're about to see a DJ Moore type of year from Terry McLaurin. In 2023, DJ Moore finally got a quarterback who was competent. And Fields is he's no Hall of Famer, right? Like, we're not saying Fields is great, but Fields was actually competent enough to give DJ Moore unlock that fantasy upside that we knew he had. And for a long time, there have been Terry McLaurin truthers since the beginning. And I was not one of them. But I started to really shift my focus to him in August. And I ended up calling Terry McLaurin a league-winning wide receiver. And when you factor in his draft price, and you factor in what he's doing in fantasy football right now, like right now, as we sit here today, first of all, Terry McLaurin had the number 3 week in fantasy football at the wide receiver position. But Terry McLaurin is the wide receiver 12 in fantasy. This guy has been really, really good. And again, what goes into a league-winning player is the upside that they present you at their draft price. Because obviously, draft price does come into account, because if I paid a second-round pick for wide receiver 12 production, I'd be fine. Like, I'd be okay with it, but I wouldn't be, thrilled with it. But if I'm paying, a mid-round cost for, the wide receiver 30 off the board, and he ends up being the wide receiver 12, we're pretty freaking excited about that, right? And that's what Terry McLaurin's doing right now. So I got to toot my own horn on this one, because like I said, I was never a big Terry McLaurin guy. I never have been. But this year, it started to kind of creep into my head around August. And I was like, I have a feeling we're going to see the DJ Moore year for Terry McLaurin, because now he's got a functional quarterback. And I bought into the Jaden Daniels hype relatively early, because I watched him at LSU. I have family that went to LSU, so, I have definitely a special interest in LSU for sure, watching them play. And really, I was just super impressed with Jaden Daniels. His ability to throw the deep ball has been on the full display this year, and it's benefiting Terry McLaurin the most. Terry McLaurin has 4 receiving touchdowns, man. I mean, this is sustainable stuff. And again, I think this guy really is a league winner. That's why I don't advise people trading him. I actually, in a lot of senses, would say if you could potentially buy him low, you probably can't. But if you could, I probably would. And then the last guy, the guy I got really wrong, because we want to be fully transparent. That's why you're here. That's why this is live, because I need to go live with this so you can see the raw emotions. And if you want to dunk on me for anything else I got wrong, feel free to go in the chat. That's what it's for. So, Javonte Williams was somebody that, it's embarrassing, honestly. It's really embarrassing. Javonte Williams is someone that I kind of jumped onto in June as a guy who I think could be a league-winning running back. It's so weird to say. It feels dirty to say it. But in June, I was saying that Javonte Williams was going to be a league-winning running back. And I did a video that was, I think, a really good one, because a couple of them have ended up really hitting. There was a video I put out about trying to find the last year's Kyron Williams, last year's Raheem Mostert, 2022's Josh Jacobs, right? These unexpected league-winning running backs that are mid to late round picks. And I wanted to find what the commonalities were. And there was a couple guys I landed on, Chuba Hubbard being one of them. That's why I was so big on Chuba this whole entire year. And Javonte was one of them. So if you want to go back and watch that full video, it's still up. You can find it. Javonte Williams is on the thumbnail, actually, that video. It came out in June. It's called the unexpected league-winning running backs in 2024. So if you want to go back and watch it, go for it. But Javonte Williams is one of the guys that I was like, I really do see it this year for him. This guy last year was coming off a torn ACL, and it's a running back coming off a torn ACL, a player coming off a torn ACL. It's really hard to expect them to produce at the level that we're used to, right? There's a couple of guys that pop out in my head in recent memory that have done really well coming off an ACL tear the very same year. Adrian Peterson and Breece Hall. Well, what are those two guys having talent? They're both supreme level talents. That's what they have in common. Javonte Williams is not in that class. There's nobody that is in that class with Breece Hall and Adrian Peterson. And if there is, it's definitely not Javonte Williams, right? So I cut him a lot of slack. And I was like, look, this guy's coming off a torn ACL. Like, he's going to have a better year this year. He's coming in. The reports out of camp are really good. And I think their offense is going to be improved. I'm actually looking back on that, and I'm like, maybe that was... I think it was honestly just like them trying to boost up his draft stock. Like, not his draft stock, his trade stock. I mean, he has been so horrible, horrifying. It's been horrible. It's like, Javonte Williams is leading the backfield pretty much, like, decidedly. And this guy can't do any... It's Najee Harris. Except Najee actually just provided us a big game. Now, volume would suggest that at some point, Javonte is going to have a good week. I'm not willing to take the shot on it. I mean, Javonte is borderline droppable in my opinion. There is seriously such limited upside in this Broncos offense. And Javonte Williams is just not getting the job done. And this one was just a bad mistake on my part. I just remember liking the guy out of college. And I remember what he did his rookie year. And I was like, okay, this guy, like, he's a pretty good player. And then the torn ACL, he just has not been the same. He has not been the same. So, Javonte Williams, as right as I was about Terry McLaurin, I was just as equally wrong about Javonte Williams as well. So that was what I got right and what I got wrong. Make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel to show your support. And I did see a super chat in here, so I will take a couple questions before I sign off for the night. Isaiah Gadsden, what's going on? Appreciate the super chat, man. Have Cooper Kupp. Should I trade him for Mike Evans? You know, this is actually going to be an interesting topic this week, obviously, because I'm going through the wide receiver rankings tomorrow, so make sure to stay tuned for that video. But a big part of it is, like, I'm going to include Cooper Kupp because there's potentially comes back this week. So Sean McVay started out the day by saying this is a big week for Cooper Kupp, and he knows it, and I know it. We all know it. It's a big week, and he actually called it a big day for Cooper Kupp because he was going to do a workout, and then we're going to kind of see how he looked. He had said he was feeling much better, and so he does the workout today and ends up, McVay comes back and said it was a good workout. Like, it was a good workout, and I don't think he said anything, like, specific, like, yeah, he's going to play this week or anything like that. I'm sure he wants to see how he looks in a full week of practice. But, point being, whoever has Kupp, either you or if you decide to do this trade, is going to get upside from him immediately. Now, what's the upside with Cooper Kupp if he's the guy? Obviously, like, the 20-plus targets that he got, in week 2? That's, like, so unsustainable. I would not recommend expecting that because that's just not going to happen. It's like Garrett Wilson last week. He had, like, 22 targets. Well, that was never going to keep up, right? It doesn't mean he can't be good. Cooper Kupp is obviously a very good player. Obviously. The problem that I have with Cooper Kupp is that this is not just a one-off, man. Like, this is not a one-off injury to where it's just like, okay, Cooper Kupp is just in this situation where he got this freaky injury and he's going to be fine. No, this guy's 30 years old and he's just been dealing with tons of injuries. Mike, on the other hand, this guy's basically an Iron Man, aside from the occasional hammy pull. But, you know, this is a great week to buy Mike Evans if you could do it. Because I honestly don't know if... I don't trust Cooper Kupp to stay healthy all year. I would personally go with Mike Evans on this side. I would personally do this one. I'm fine with sending him away. Yeah, Cooper Kupp for Mike Evans, I would do it. Appreciate the super chat. Alexis Bolanos, what's going on? Appreciate the super chat. Week 7, start Murray or Fields or drop one for Darnold now that Hutchinson is out? Yeah, obviously, real quick, Aiden Hutchinson. I didn't end up watching that full game yesterday. I was mainly watching the Steelers one. And so I didn't see the injury. I mean, obviously brutal. I mean, that's a brutal injury. Hopefully he has a pretty speedy recovery, but I mean, that one's brutal. Prayers up for him. But, with Darnold this week, the Lions are not a bad matchup for a quarterback. Now, the one thing that does concern me is obviously the divisional element to this one. But, I was ranking my wide receivers today, and I kept finding myself, specifically with Jordan Addison, just thinking to myself, like, I think that I'm struggling to get on board for some reason with this team, the Vikings team. I don't know what it is. I think it's Sam Darnold, a lot of it. To be honest with you, I think I'm struggling to get on board. But obviously, it's unquestioned that he's done really well in fantasy. Kyler is so hot and cold. Honestly, right now, with Kyler's opponent being the Chargers, I don't like that matchup. It's such a bad matchup with low upside, in my opinion. And with Justin Fields this week, he plays the Jets at home on Sunday night. Well, the one thing we have to go on with the Steelers on Monday night is that they looked putrid offensively. They went into a turtle shell. They retreated. They were just like, don't touch us. Like, we don't want to move the ball. It's like, what are y'all doing? And then they come out with Justin Fields in week 6, and he looked great in fantasy. I can't trust him. I actually would rather just go ahead and take the shot on Justin Fields. I'm totally fine with I mean, it sucks to say to drop Fields, but I personally would try to go with Darnold here. And see if I could maybe add another quarterback just for this week, and then just see what you think, because the one thing with that Darnold has over Fields right now is that his job is secure all year, right? Unless he gets hurt, his job is secure. With Fields, this guy is being threatened by Russell Wilson. Like, he's looking over his shoulder. If he has another bad game this week, it wouldn't surprise me at all if the Steelers decided to do it. It would not surprise me. So I would personally go with Darnold this week. Appreciate the super chat. What's going on? Appreciate the super chat. Traded DJ Moore and Ramondre for Kupp. What do you think? I don't hate it, because DJ Moore, I called him a buy low several weeks ago, but I will say that the chemistry between him and Caleb hasn't grown to the way I wished. And the thing that I was banking on was that he was going to, get better as the year goes. Well, guess what? He has. Like, every single game, Caleb has looked like a better player. But that hasn't been because, he's developed chemistry with DJ. And I thought that would kind of be a byproduct of it all. You take away that Panthers game, DJ Moore's been, not just mid, he's been pretty underwhelming in fantasy. Ramondre I don't trust at all. Cooper Kupp, again, my ultimate problem with Kupp right now is that I truly don't trust him to maintain the health. But obviously the upside with Kupp is simply higher than the upside with DJ Moore. In this offense with Caleb Williams, it's just not meshing yet. So Kupp obviously has the upside on his side. He's got the consistent target share on his side. As long as he's out there, you'll be able to consistently feel good about playing Kupp rather than DJ Moore. So I don't blame you from that aspect. If it was me personally, I probably would have held on, to be honest with you. Maybe I'm ridiculous for thinking this. I just don't trust Kupp. I don't. The injury history is lengthy with Cooper Kupp. He's 30 years old. And in the third game of the year, he goes down to an ankle injury. I just don't see him lasting another, we're going into week 7, so they're coming off their bye week, so they've got 10 games left. I just don't trust them. I don't trust him. So I get it. You're going for the upside here. I like the move to go for the upside, but ultimately I think I probably would have held and tried to send DJ Moore for somebody else that I could get upside with, in my opinion. Appreciate you, though. Appreciate you very much. We'll take a couple more questions at the top, and then we're going to go ahead and sign off for the night. Back up to the top. Would you trade A.J. Brown or Tank Dell or Wan'Dale Robinson or St. Brown for Mike Evans? Pick one of it's even worth it, number one. For Mike, obviously I would love to get Mike Evans. Yeah, of course. Like, it's definitely worth it to get Mike Evans here. I mean, obviously, if you can send Dell or Wan'Dale for Mike Evans, that's a winning move. That's a winning move. That's not going to happen. Maybe you can pull the wool over someone's eyes with Tank Dell, but it's not going to happen for Wan'Dale. So, like, you know, I don't have a problem sending out the Wan'Dale offer just because, like, I don't have a problem, like, trying to take advantage of the league mates if you think they don't know what they're doing. I don't have a problem with sending it out, but you're not going to get it done with Wan'Dale 99% of the time. Would I trade A.J. Brown or Amon-Ra St. Brown, though? I wouldn't trade A.J. Brown. I think AJ's AJ. Like, that guy is going to get you 20 fantasy points per game, potentially, this year. Amon-Ra has been... I mean, Amon-Ra's great. And when he's on, like, it's great. But it's not always consistent with him. Obviously, this past week, the opportunity was there against the Cowboys, and he just didn't... Like, he wasn't very good. They just didn't really need him. So, I just really do think that I'd probably hang back if you can't send Tank Dell or if you can't send Wan'Dale Robinson, which you probably won't be able to. But you could try it. Steve512, what's going on? I appreciate you tonight. Steve, let's see if you put a question in. Steve512, where are you? Steve512. Scary Terry? I see that comment from you. Indeed, he is scary this year, man. Yeah, I guess I'll wait a couple more seconds for you to put your question in. I'm assuming you've got a question. If not, I appreciate the super chat. But overall, I'll just finish off on a note really quick while I wait for Steve. Again, I'm curious, like, let me know what y'all thought about the refs tonight. Because, like, they drove me nuts in this Monday night game. They were just, like, it just felt like they were saying, like, well, we're the stars of the show here. So, like, I know that y'all just came to watch us. So let me make sure that I throw a flag every other play. Just so you don't forget about me because, by the way, I am the star of the show. Like, that's how it felt tonight to me. And I was just like, I was, like, borderline throwing, like, food at my TV. Like, my wife was, like, laughing at me tonight. She was, like, sitting on the couch just listening to me, like, gripe and moan about the refs tonight. And I was just like, do you not see this, honey? Like, and she's just, like, laughing at me. And she knows me. I mean, this is the thing. I'm a football fan, too. So I love to go through it, too. So I really enjoyed the game as a whole, personally. I just really was frustrated with watching the refs tonight. Well, Steve, I appreciate you sending the super chat in. I'm assuming you don't have a question since I haven't seen anything from you. I'll do one more look for you. The last thing I see from you up at the top is that I hope you're right about the Jacoby for Shaheed trade that you talked about earlier today. Oh, yeah. I mean, honestly, like, with Shaheed, I had no idea that this was actually a major issue. Like, I knew that his knee, like, he left that game at the end of it. And I just kind of thought, you know, it was, like, not a stinger necessarily, but it was like, okay, like, this game's a blowout anyways. Like, maybe he just, like, tweaked it or did something to it. And he just, you know, wasn't getting, like, they were like, it's over. The game's over, so, like, why risk you at this point? I didn't know that it was this serious. Like, apparently it's a legitimate injury. And it's scary to hear that, for sure. With Jacoby, I personally really like Jacoby a lot in fantasy right now. It's not, like, he's not, like, a top 20 wide receiver. Understand that. Like, top 15, top 20, that's not Jacoby's thing. He's a 10 target a game guy, though, with a low upside quarterback, right? So it's like Demario Douglas now with Drake May, honestly. And I actually think Demario Douglas, he's got legitimate upside. Watch the wide receiver rankings tomorrow. Defense rankings coming out as well. I appreciate y'all being in here tonight. Make sure to like the video on your way out. Subscribe to the channel as well. And take advantage of the Bo Nix underdog projection this week for him. It's at 0.5 total yards. It may stress you out for a half, whether he's gonna hit that projection or not, but he's gonna do it, obviously. So take advantage of it. Description. There's a link in there. You can use code FFN, get a 50% deposit match, and you'll really support the channel. Appreciate you guys.